Alright, I am back with the bread loaf named Evie over there, who is lounging, for a Destiny 2 video. I'm not going to make a video about the starter pack that everyone is mad about, myself included. I already did an article about that, so I wouldn't have to talk about it in the video, even though that video probably would have done more views, because angry videos do, but so do angry articles, so there we go. It's bad. It's squeezing blood from a stone. I don't know. Just read the article. Anyway, I wanted to talk about day one, essentially the first 24 hours with Season of the Wish, the final true season of Destiny 2 as we move into the episodic model next year. This is going to be a 6-month long season, which is now confirmed by the delay into June. And there was some sort of 2-month event called Into the Light, which I don't know what it is. It's supposed to be for new players. We don't know yet. They're going to tell us more about it later. Not expecting anything super big from that. But so far, first impressions of the season. I don't know how wild I am about the storyline where we resurrect the ghost of Riven and like there's all these like crazy lore explanations of like, well, how did we summon the ghost of Riven? And it's like, oh, the paracausal energy and then like similarly, getting Riven's eggs collected that are now currently orbiting space and time, which is a convoluted way of saying we can only get one a week through the current process. It's a little much and kind of exemplifies everyone's problems with the seasonal model and just doing the one thing a week and just having it keep going and going. That may change with the episodic model. But we'll see. We're only kind of just starting to scratch the surface of the loot. There's a lot of loot. It's mostly reprised stuff. Like there's reprised Undying weapons, which I did not expect to see. There's reprised Demon City weapons, and then all of these seasonal weapons are reskins either of the Season of the Chosen weapons. I forget which one is like Threaded Needle and stuff, and then Europa weapons. I've barely gotten any of those, and I've barely messed around with some of the new perks, some of which seem not great, others of which seem quite good. And they brought back Breakneck first of all, and the whatever the perk is about increasing fire rate as like a perk that can drop on things now. There's a lot, so it's going to take a little bit of time to get your god roll guides spinning up and things like that. What we mainly have to go on right now is the initial story stuff, which was like, run a light version of the seasonal activities. And then I think everyone was really not thrilled to be led into a blind well quest step where you have to do two full tier 4 blind wells in order to complete that step. They updated blind well to make enemies a fixed power level above you, so you're not just like auto burning everything. It's still not very hard, just the bosses have a little bit more life. None of the mechanics are different. And it does have some of the new Dreaming City weapons, or the reprised ones they brought back, but the loot pool is so big, it doesn't matter, and you can farm those much easier in a different activity. So I don't think it was the best idea to do that, and I think it really turned a lot of people off when like literally like the second step of the season storyline was to go to the blind well and farm that twice. You can launch directly into it now, which I did not know until I finished it on all 3 characters. Evie, you stretching? You doing downward dog, upward dog? Okay. So that leads us into what will be the main draw of this season, Coil. Coil is a seasonal activity, and for all intents and purposes, it seems to be a very, very, very good seasonal activity. Last season, Season of the Witch, I praised both of the activities we had there, Altars of Summoning and Savathun Spire. I thought those were both really good in and of themselves. And then in Season of the Deep, it seemed like we kind of had something interesting going with deep dives where it was like, it was over the weeks you would get more and more sections and you could make them increasingly difficult if players agreed to a difficulty. And like there was something in there that seemed like a good idea, except by the end it got really screwed up. So no one could agree on a difficulty. Everyone was running off to do an exotic quest. It was a disaster. Here, the Coil is kind of doing the same thing, except without needing the same kind of player cooperation. It is essentially running a gauntlet of activities in a way that does remind me a little bit of Menagerie, the gold standard, and certainly reminds me of Menagerie in terms of the sheer amount of loot you can get from it. So you start. It's a little bit like deep dives where you can purchase boons for in activity currency at the beginning to boost different skills. So you run a loop. You do one traversal segment, which is like standing on plates, avoiding poison or avoiding spike traps, which are some of which are very deadly. And then you do a mob segment, like a mob clearing segment. Then you do another traversal segment. Then you do a boss room, and you start with a pool of revives for your whole team. It's like 20 something revives. It seems like a lot. Except you keep doing this. And every time you do this loop and you go back to the Riven room and you buy a new upgrade or something after farming currency from enemies and jars and all this stuff, then you pick another boon and you do it again. Except the enemies are now, I think it's 5 power levels more each time you do it. So it's 5 over. Or I think it's at level, then it's 5 over, then it's 10 over, then it's 15 over. So you're supposed to do this, I think there's a max of 4 runs you do this. And each time, if you get enough motes in a traversal segment, then there's a secret chest room, which I think always can drop or always drops a Dreaming City weapon or something like that. I've gotten a few of these, but I didn't really know how to do all this until I watched Scarrow's video. You should go watch that. And then if you get a ton of motes, like every mote in the frickin' all the runs, you can get a secret bonus chest room at the end of 4 runs that has 6 chests, so a ton of loot. Like if you do everything in this, you can get, and then like each time you do a cycle, you get loot from the chest at Riven. So there's a ton of loot in this, and that's good because there's a ton of weapons to get in here, and it's very fun because it's a seasonal activity that is actually pretty challenging at baseline, especially when you get up into the higher levels. And I was a little worried because it's like wipe and go to orbit, but it's not wipe and go to orbit because there's no, I don't think there's like a revive countdown timer. It's just once you run out of revives, then you'll go to orbit. I had a lot of fun doing this so far, and one of the main problems is like people will drop out after the certain segments and they don't end up getting replaced, but it scales to fire team level. So me and this other dude, like a level 5 dude, just ran it. We got all the way through the 3rd round, and then we ran out of revives during the 4th round because it was very high level enemies and the two of us couldn't really manage it. But it was a lot of fun, and it did scale well for the most part to the two of us, and we got a lot of loot, and it was still fun even if we didn't fully complete it. And it's interesting to see a fun, challenging seasonal activity that isn't challenging because they just threw a bunch of champions in there or a bunch of really awful modifiers. The modifiers today aren't great. The one where you have to be near your person to have regen, or you don't have any regen at all, like you gotta really keep moving in these areas, so not having any regen is not great. The spike traps can be really frustrating because your revives are so limited, and it's like the hitboxes for these spikes are kind of crazy. There's one part where there's a spike trap right at the beginning on like a little platform, and like if you're Hunter, you can just do like a little hop around it, but like on Warlock, when you're floating, you just keep kind of screwing it up a lot of the time and just losing like three revives just from that. I got to figure out a better way to do that. But like your teammates will do that, and you have no control over your teammates running into spikes, and like it's a whole thing. But on the whole, I would say it's probably going to be less frustrating than say deep dives where you're emoting the hell out of, to try to get people to come do the increased difficulty thing. This time it's just a matter of like, will people stay in a run and keep doing this, or will they ditch out? And so that's kind of what we have to go on right now. The Coil does seem like a very promising seasonal activity, and I think it is Bungie learning from a lot of the things they've done right in past activities, whether that's recent things like deep dives or really old things like Menagerie and how much loot you got from that. It won't be perfect, but I think it's a very good start, and the more I've played it, the more I've liked it. For the rest of the season, it's just too hard to really say this early. It's always too hard to say this early. Like, some things are exciting, some things don't land well right away, and what may be fun now is boring later. What may seem boring now is fun later. Some key things we have going forward. We have the dungeon launching on Friday, which is Warlord's Ruin, and we've gotten a picture of it. It's like a giant ice castle. They showed off the dungeon armor in the game already, and it's like ice climber themed dungeon armor. And if I was playing my clip, by the way, earlier, which is like the intro story mission, if if you see me just randomly pausing and not shooting things, it's because my mouse is dying. I'm not just that bad. Anyway, I wanted to make that clear. Uh, but yeah, so that is coming up, and even though we know the dungeons are sold separately, they are attached to the season, and we can't really avoid, unlinking those. I do wonder if, for the first time in a while, if this dungeon will be unlinked from the seasonal story content, because like an EDZ based Warlords Peak Mountain thing does seem like it would be pretty disconnected from Dreaming City Riven stuff, whereas unlike the past few dungeons, they've directly tied into the story, and they may just not be doing that. Otherwise, we there does seem to be like a big exotic quest that's coming at some point. That bow that they showed off in the trailers, the strand bow, I believe will be the exotic from that, and it's craftable, so that reinforces that. Craftable exotic signifies some sort of extended exotic quests like we've gotten with Revision Zero and Dead Man's Tale and things like that. So I think it's going to be a big one, not like a mini one. It's been a little while since we've had one of those, and I think Bungie realizes it's about time for one of those. So we don't know when that's coming, but there's like a whole secret triumph section for it, and like that's what it is. And those are always fun missions, so I'm certainly looking forward to doing that and seeing what they've maybe learned from the past few of these, which I think generally have gone very well. But there's always room for improvement. In terms of other stuff, I just found out right before this. Apparently, Iron Banner is finally going to be selling the old year one ornaments for Iron Banner, which I did not get in year one because I was barely playing Destiny in between, Warmind and Curse of Osiris releases, and I certainly wasn't playing Iron Banner back then. But it's some of like the coolest armor ornaments, and I have been like begging them to bring those back somehow. And by selling, I mean they're selling them for Iron Banner engrams and like Glimmer. So you just have to earn, I think it's 3 Iron Banner engrams per piece. And like, I will grind the shit out of Iron Banner in order to get those because I've been waiting literally 6 years for these. And given that there's 5 Iron Banners in this giant season, I guess there will be plenty of time. There will be more stuff to talk about. Again, I could do a whole video on the microtransactions. It's not just a starter pack. There's a shader pack for $10. There's the $20 arm. There's too many things, but that's a conversation for another day. And I wanted to focus on my first impressions, which story stuff, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure how much more we're going to learn here. The best story thing I've seen so far is the flavor text or the lore text on one of the new sparrows, which is like a drifter and heiress thing. But like the actual storyline of what's going on here with Mara and Riven, I don't really know what exactly we're heading toward here, except hatching a bunch of new Ahamkaras, which does not seem like the best idea, but I guess we don't really have a choice. So yeah, so I will, continue farming and seeing what the season brings and what the story brings. And we will see when this sort of runs out of steam. And obviously it will run out of steam because it's a 6-month season and that is impossible. Like these normally run out of steam after a month and a half, and that's just kind of how things work. And then we get some holiday events. They are doing the Memento thing with I think all seasonal events now, where the Dawning has some sort of animated ice shader ornament you can get, which that's actually cool. I think they finally figured out a reason to get people to play these seasonal holiday events. I think that's fun. I wish you could stack those, but besides that, I think it's a good idea. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.